When I was coming up, old folks had a saying, when it rains, it pours. Basically, when things are going terrible, it gets worse. And for the city of Chicago, boy, does that seem to be the case. Remember just last year, they had a mayor, Lori Lightfoot, who came with a lot of expertise. You know, she was a federal prosecutor, went to University of Chicago Law School, Bachelor's of Arts from University of Michigan, just had a whole lot of experience. And when she became the mayor, well, you know what? She increased police funding, pretty much did the things that most folks wanted her to do, and it wasn't good enough. The incoming mayor, Brandon Johnson, was supposed to be better than her. In many ways, he's a progressive, but he's progressively, drum roll please, stupid. That's right. Give a round of applause. The mayor, Brandon Johnson, is an idiot. Only 1 year into his term, and I can guarantee you when re-election comes about, he will never be re-elected mayor again for many reasons. But let's talk about public health in the city of Chicago. Now, I will be fair when I say that Chicago Mayor Brandon Johnson could have never stopped the buses coming into Chicago. That's a federal mandate. Even Texas, a Republican state, couldn't stop them from coming in. However, there are certain things that he could have done to mitigate the public health issue in the city. Let's go over to the Pilsen Migrant Shelter, which is, I believe, on the west side of Chicago, where you have a lot of Hispanics. Here's what started happening over there.
And now to the measles outbreak in the Chicago area. It continues to spread. There are now 52 cases. Most of them are in the city, but it has now reached suburban Cook, Lake, and Will counties. Charlie Wojciechowski has details on how it's happening and what's being done to stop it.
Cook County officials confirmed their first case of measles outside of Chicago was likely contracted here at the city's largest migrant shelter on South Halsted.
So it was a child, and the mom was in close contact with the child, and the mom may or may not, mom is at risk or may not actually get measles. So we're tracking the situation.
A situation that has already attracted attention from the Centers for Disease Control, which has visited this shelter. According to the CDC, of the 60-plus cases they are counting nationwide, more than 50 are from the Chicago area. More specifically, the Illinois Department of Public Health says that as of today, it knows of 49 cases in Chicago and one each in Lake, suburban Cook, and Will counties. Because so many young people stay at this shelter, Chicago has already put special procedures in place here. Chicago is encouraging vaccinations at the center, especially for young people. They say even after you've gotten your first vaccination, you can only wait maybe as long as 28 days before you get the second one.
We're really trying to put, a buffer of immunity around them as soon as possible, so that they either won't get the infection, or if they get it, it's going to be a milder form.
But Dr. Lamar Hasbrook says outside of the special situation, parents outside of this shelter whose 1-year-olds have already had their first measles shot probably shouldn't rush to get a second one so soon. But if you haven't vaccinated or aren't sure you have, he says now is a good time to see your doctor to make sure your immunity is up to date.
That's right. That measles outbreak happened at the Pilsen shelter, homeless shelter for migrants, right? And that shelter is in a Hispanic neighborhood. So you had all these people living on top of each other, and then that outbreak happened. And if you go outside and you just cough on people, it could be a complete disaster, especially for kids. I've already talked about that. And hey, public health could have done something like immunize people coming from Central America or South America, which they didn't do. But guess what? When it rains, it pours, because now you have this outbreak.
As health officials ramp up contact tracing at migrant shelters, we spoke with 2 medical experts today who tell us while this is cause for concern, the general public has no reason to panic.
outbreaks occur in close quarters.
The Chicago Department of Public Health confirms cases of tuberculosis at a few different shelters. Officials call the number of cases small, but won't disclose which sites they've originated from.
So the people who are most at risk of tuberculosis are the other migrants living in that shelter.
This comes in the midst of a measles outbreak at the Pilsen shelter.
There is no effective vaccine against tuberculosis.
Tuberculosis is an infectious bacterial disease that mainly affects the lungs.
It can only be spread by someone with active tuberculosis disease, someone who is actively coughing up these droplets. That is how it gets spread.
Dr. Gary Rayshak, a pediatrician with Northwestern Medicine Huntley Hospital, says open-air facilities like shelters can lead to increased transmission.
The important thing is trying to figure out who there has the active disease and properly treating them.
Meanwhile, city officials say about 10 to 20% of residents of Central and South America have latent TB.
Oh yeah, the good TB, tuberculosis. But guess what? Public health is not disclosing how many people have suffered from this. And that's why Alderman Lopez, a Hispanic alderman in Chicago, is saying this.
So Chicago health officials confirming a, quote, small number of tuberculosis cases in migrant shelters across the city. But they're not saying how many. This comes after 56 known measles cases are reported in the Windy City. Chicago Alderman Raymond Lopez has warned about this issue for months, and he joins us now. So Raymond, you warned them that this was going to happen, but they didn't listen to you. Are they listening now?
You know, Lawrence, good morning. I don't know how much our Department of Public Health or other officials are listening to the alarms that we've been raising since August of last year, and even in September when we had receipts from our ambulances showing that we had individuals testing positive for tuberculosis. This is a crisis we could have avoided, just like with the measles, if we had simply instituted the American standard of vaccines upon all of those migrants being shipped to the city of Chicago. Many of these individuals come with children, they are in our schools, and all of those vaccination requirements that our kids are responsible for are waived for the migrant asylum seeker children. And that is putting people, families, and communities at risk.
You know, Raymond, I've been so perplexed because, you know, I've been out there reporting, talking with the folks. They're upset. I know your district, and the people there are minorities. They're also, you got immigrants there as well. But it seems like the mayor has tried to paint those that are critical of this sanctuary city policy and not having a response to the people there as anti-immigrant.
Without question, we have seen where efforts by this administration to put migrants on a toxic dump site were labeled as racist when people like myself and community opposed it, saying it wasn't healthy for them or for the neighborhood to have all of that dust kicked up. Even when I brought this issue about tuberculosis, measles, and mumps to the forefront, I've been told that I'm anti-immigrant and xenophobic, even though I'm the great-grandson of immigrants.
You see, I'm going to be honest. There is no way any mayor would have been able to stop migrants from coming into Chicago. It was a federal mandate. So even if Chicago had a Republican mayor or a Democratic mayor, there was no way to stop it. I feel like maybe, and I'm not the best political person to say this, maybe they could have not pushed for the sanctuary city status, and also how they are handling the spending of the money and how transparent that process could have been, because hey, that's why NBC Chicago sued them, because they were not getting access to the spending records in Chicago. Now what the alderman is saying is we don't have access to the health records, so we really don't know what's going on. This again comes at a bad time for Brandon Johnson. Remember, his chief of staff just quit like 2 weeks ago. So now you're not showing, the money that's being spent overall. You're not handling your public health situations that well. So if you can't handle this, what else can you not handle? You won't handle crime, the city's budget, jobs, nothing. You've already lost to bring Chicago home because nobody has any faith in you. That's because you're silly, right? Brandon Johnson is silly. He is not ready to be a mayor of a large metropolitan city. And despite the fact that it's early in his tenure, I can almost assure you that this guy is not going to make it for a second term. The reason why is these are simple things that he should have figured out. You should have immediately got everybody immunized, especially coming from places where you know tuberculosis is high, measles is high. And these are diseases that the United States pretty much eradicated a long time ago. But because you're importing this to the country, and people that get TB or measles, either you go to a third world country for a vacation or somebody comes there. But that's something that you should have been, readily accessible to. So now the person that's the head of public health should have alerted you to this. That should have been their job, but they didn't. And who does that all come back down to? The mayor. Why? Well, you're getting over $200,000 a year and you got a raise. You got a raise to do absolutely nothing, which is pretty much what mayors do in bigger cities. But guys, what do you think? It's your boy, Shady Jackson, back at it again with another episode of Fair Use. I'm out.